The Allied fleet gathered at the edge of Council space, a wall of ships stretching across light years of empty void. Admiral Ben Crawford looked at the tactical display on the bridge of the Defiant and felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. 800,000 ships. Crews from over 200 species. The largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Thought it was not enough. The silence. Fleet appeared on long-range sensors like a dark stain spreading across the stars. 10 million ships, each one a perfect machine of destruction, moving in formations so precise that they seemed like a single organism. They did not slow down. They did not hesitate. They simply advanced, consuming everything in their path. Katie Morrison stood beside Ben on the bridge. She had refused to stay behind on Varanthos Prime, insisting that she needed to be with the fleet. Ben had argued with her for hours, but she would not be moved. If they failed here, there would be nowhere safe in the galaxy anyway. "They are sending a communication," one of the officers reported, surprise clear in her voice. "Admiral, the silence has never communicated before." Ben nodded. "Put it through." The message appeared on every screen in the fleet. A simple text in a language that no one recognized, but everyone somehow understood. The words were cold and empty, stripped of any emotion or humanity. "Surrender and your extinction will be painless." The bridge fell silent. Ben could feel the fear spreading through the fleet, through the crews of hundreds of thousands of ships. They had trained for this moment, but training could not prepare anyone for the reality of facing annihilation. The species who had never known war were remembering why their ancestors had evolved past violence. The terror was primal, ancient, overwhelming. Ben looked at Katie. What should we say? Katie thought about the moment in the Grand Chamber, 6 months ago, when the Voshkith Elder had asked humanity to help. She thought about the single word she had spoken then, the word that had changed everything. And she knew exactly what humanity's response to the silence should be. No. Ben smiled, a grim expression that held no humor but carried absolute determination. He opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. "This is Admiral Crawford. The enemy has asked us to surrender. Humanity's answer is no. I expect the same from every species standing with us today. We did not come here to die quietly. We came here to fight. All ships, prepare for battle." The response came back from every corner of the fleet. Species that had never known war were shouting defiance at the void. Beings that had spent millions of years pursuing peace were now burning with a fierce determination to survive. The single word echoed across thousands of communication channels, becoming a battle cry that united the galaxy. No, no, no. The silence did not respond. Perhaps they had never expected resistance. Perhaps they did not understand what resistance meant. They simply continued their advance, and the battle began. The first hours were terrible. The silence weapons tore through Allied ships with terrifying efficiency. Entire squadrons vanished in moments, their crews dying before they could even react. The alien species who had never fought before made mistakes that cost them dearly. Fear threatened to break the fleet apart, but humanity had prepared for this. Human commanders had been placed on every ship, embedded in every squadron. They did not let their alien crews panic. They did not let them run. They held the line with sheer willpower and the tactics that humanity had refined through thousands of years of warfare. Colonel Lisa Trent commanded a strike force of Valorian ships. She watched the battle unfold around her, seeing patterns in the chaos that her alien crew could not recognize. "There," she said, pointing at the tactical display. "The command ship. It is coordinating their fleet movements. If we take it out, their formation will break." A Valorian first officer looked at the display with horror. "Colonel, the path to that ship goes directly through their heaviest defenses. We would not survive." Lisa nodded. "I know. She opened a channel to her squadron. "All ships, follow my lead. We are going straight through." The strike force dove into the heart of the Silence Formation. Ships exploded around them, crews dying by the hundreds. Lisa did not flinch. She did not waver. She kept her eyes on the target, even as her own ship took hit after hit. They reached the command ship. Lisa's vessel was barely holding together, but it was still moving, still fighting. She aimed at the command ship's core and fired everything she had. The explosion lit up the battlefield. The Silence command ship broke apart, and suddenly their perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Ships that had been moving as one began acting independently. Their coordination shattered. Lisa's ship was falling apart around her. Alarm screamed. Fire burned. Her crew was dying. But on the tactical display, she could see the Allied fleet pressing their advantage, pushing into the gaps that her sacrifice had created. "Colonel," our first officer said, his voice weak, "we did it. We broke them." Lisa smiled. "Tell the Admiral. Tell him to finish the job." The Defiant received Lisa's last transmission. Ben Crawford stood on his bridge, tears streaming down his face, and gave the order that no military commander in galactic history had ever given. "All ships, pursue and destroy. Do not let a single one escape." The Allied fleet surged forward. Species that had never known violence now fought with a fury that shocked even their human teachers. They had seen their comrades die. They had felt the terror of facing extinction. And now they channeled all of that fear and pain into something powerful and unstoppable. The Silence tried to retreat. For the first time in 2 million years, the machines that had destroyed 10,000 species were running away. But the Allied fleet would not let them go. Ship by ship, the Silence was hunted down and destroyed. When it was over, the void was filled with wreckage. The Allied fleet had been shattered. Less than half their ships still operational. Hundreds of thousands had died. The cost had been almost too terrible to bear. But the Silence was gone. Every last ship destroyed. The threat that had haunted the galaxy for 2 million years had been ended by a coalition of species that had learned to fight, led by the youngest and most violent race in the cosmos. On the bridge of the Defiant, Katie Morrison stood beside Admiral Crawford. They were both exhausted, covered in dust and burns from the battle damage. But they were alive. Against all odds, they had survived. The Voshkith Elder appeared on their screen, its light brighter than Katie had ever seen it. "Ambassador Morrison, Admiral Crawford. The Galactic Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You taught us how to fight. You led us to victory. You saved every living being in this galaxy." Katie shook her head. "We did not do it alone. Every species fought today. Every species sacrificed. But you started it," the Elder said. "When we asked for your help, you simply said yes. When the enemy demanded our surrender, you simply said no. 2 words. 2 simple words that changed everything." The Elder paused, its light pulsing with emotion. "I have lived for longer than I can remember. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But I have never understood anything as clearly as I understand humanity now." Katie looked up at the ancient being. "What do you understand?" "I understand why you said yes without conditions. I understand why you said no without fear. You did not need complicated reasons or lengthy negotiations. Protecting others and refusing to surrender are not complicated concepts for you. They are simply what you do. They are who you are." The Elder's light filled the screen. "Let it be recorded for all time. When the Galactic Council asked for help, humanity said yes. When the Silence demanded surrender, humanity said no. 2 words. 2 simple words. And with those words, a young species taught an ancient galaxy what it truly means to be alive. Katie looked out at the wreckage of the battlefield, at the debris of ships from 100 worlds. She thought about Lisa Trent and all the others who had given their lives. She thought about the fear they had all felt and the courage they had found. "We did not do anything special," Katie said quietly. "We just did what humans have always done." And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds that had been saved by humanity's two simple words, beings who had never known conflict finally understood. They understood the strange, violent, wonderful species called humanity. A people who would say yes to protecting strangers without asking why. A people who would say no to any force that threatened them without hesitation or fear. A people who had taught an entire galaxy that sometimes the most powerful things in the universe are the simplest dot. Yes. No. Two words that shocked the galaxy. Two words that saved it. 6 months had passed since humanity said yes. In that time, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have imagined. The species that had spent millions of years pursuing peace were now learning the art of war. And humanity was their teacher. Admiral Ben Crawford stood on the bridge of the Defiant, the first warship built using combined human and alien technology. The vessel was massive, larger than any ship humanity had ever constructed, powered by engines that human scientists still did not fully understand. But the weapons, the tactics, the fighting spirit that made it dangerous, those were purely human. Ben looked out at the fleet assembling around him. Ships from dozens of species were taking formation, each one carrying crews that had spent the last 6 months learning everything humanity could teach them. It was not enough time. Everyone knew that. But it was all they had. On a training world 3 systems away, Colonel Lisa Trent was facing a different kind of challenge. She stood before a group of Valorian recruits, their silver bodies gleaming in the artificial sunlight of the training facility. The Valorians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, capable of feats that seemed like magic to human eyes. But they had never fought. They had never even raised a hand in anger. And Lisa had to teach them how to kill. "No, no, no," Lisa said, shaking her head as she watched a Valorian attempt to hold a weapon. "You are treating it like a scientific instrument. It is not. It is a tool for ending lives. You have to understand it before you can use it effectively." The Valorian looked at her with confusion in its crystalline eyes. "I do not understand, Colonel. Why must I feel anything about the weapon? It is simply a device that projects energy." Lisa sighed and set down her own weapon. She had been having this conversation with different species for months now. They all struggled with the same problem. They could understand the mechanics of fighting, but they could not grasp the mentality. "Let me ask you something," Lisa said. "Why are you here? Why are you trying to learn this?" The Valorian was quiet for a moment. "Because the silence is coming. Because if I do not learn to fight, everyone I love will die." Lisa nodded. "Hold on to that feeling. That fear, that love, that desperate need to protect. That is what makes a soldier. Not the weapon. Not the training. The willingness to do terrible things so that others can live. That is what you need to find inside yourself." On another world, Dr. Samuel Park was working with alien scientists to develop weapons that could actually harm the silence. The machines were unlike anything the galaxy had encountered. They were made of materials that did not exist in normal space, powered by energy sources that defied physics, protected by shields that absorbed everything thrown at them. Human weapons were effective, but they needed to be scaled up enormously to work against ships the size of small moons. Samuel was exhausted. He had been working 20-hour days for months, pushing himself and his team beyond any reasonable limit. But every time he thought about resting, he remembered the images the Thelmari had shown in the Grand Chamber. 10,000 species wiped from existence. Entire civilizations reduced to nothing. He could not rest. Not until the job was done. Dr. Park, one of his alien colleagues, said, "A being that looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes. I believe we have made a breakthrough. The energy patterns you suggested seem to be disrupting the silence shield harmonics." Samuel rushed over to look at the data. His eyes widened as he saw the results. This could work. This could actually work. Back on Varanthos Prime, Katie Morrison had been promoted to High Ambassador. She was now responsible for holding together a coalition of 846 species, many of whom had never worked together, and some of whom had been rivals for millions of years. It was like trying to herd cats, except the cats were ancient beings with godlike powers and conflicting agendas. The Corvin are refusing to integrate their fleet with the Thelmari, Katie's aide reported. Something about an incident 300,000 years ago. Katie rubbed her temples. Set up a meeting. I will talk to them myself. It was the same thing every day. Old grudges, ancient conflicts, petty disputes that had been simmering for longer than humanity had existed. Katie had to remind herself constantly that these beings were terrified. Fear made people do strange things, and it made ancient aliens do even stranger things. But slowly, impossibly, things were coming together. The Corvin and Thelmari agreed to work together after Katie spent 12 hours in negotiations with them. The weapons that Samuel and his team developed were showing real promise. The soldiers that Lisa was training were beginning to understand what it meant to fight. And the fleet that Ben was assembling was growing larger every day. Keeper Vithanus, the Thelmari historian who had revealed the truth about the silence, visited the training facility one day. The ancient being moved slowly through the halls, watching Valorians and Corvins and dozens of other species learning the arts of war. Vethanos stopped beside Lisa, its crystal body glowing with soft colors. I have watched civilizations rise and fall for 2 million years, Vethanos said. I have seen wonders that would break a human mind, but I have never seen anything like this. Lisa looked up from the training schedule she was reviewing. Like what? Like hope being born from despair. Like ancient beings learning new things after millions of years of stagnation. Like a young species teaching its elders how to survive. Vethanos turned to look at Lisa directly. I think I finally understand why the universe created beings like you. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? Every species in this galaxy evolved toward peace. We believed that violence was a weakness to be overcome, a primitive impulse to be transcended. But in our pursuit of enlightenment, we lost something important. We lost the ability to protect ourselves. We lost the will to fight for our survival. Vethanos paused, its light flickering. Humans never lost that. You kept your claws sharp, your instincts keen. And now, when the darkness comes, you are ready to face it. Before Lisa could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. She grabbed her communicator and saw a message that made her blood run cold. The silence had arrived early. Their fleet had been detected at the edge of Council space, and it was larger than anyone had predicted. Over 10 million ships moving in perfect formation, heading straight for the heart of the galaxy. Lisa looked at Vethanos. How long do we have? 47 days. Maybe less. Lisa straightened her shoulders and turned to face her recruits. They were scared. She could see it in their alien eyes, in the way their bodies trembled, in the fear that radiated from every species present. But underneath that fear, she saw something else. Determination, resolve, the beginnings of the warrior spirit that humanity had been trying to teach them. Listen up, Lisa called out, her voice cutting through the alarm. The enemy is coming. We are not ready. We were never going to be ready. But we are going to fight anyway. Because that is what we do. That is what it means to be alive. She grabbed her weapon and held it high. Now who is with me? One by one, then in groups, then all together, the alien recruits raised their own weapons. They did not cheer like humans would. They did not shout battle cries. But the silence that filled the room was somehow more powerful than any noise could have been. It was the silence of beings who had found their courage. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 training worlds and shipyards and command centers, the same scene was playing out. The silence was coming. But the galaxy was no longer afraid. It was angry. It was united. And for the first time in 2 million years, it was ready to fight. Katie stepped forward from the human section. Every species in the Grand Chamber watched her move, their attention so focused that she could feel it like physical pressure against her skin. She walked past rows of ancient beings, past creatures that had existed for millions of years, past civilizations that had solved the mysteries of the universe while humanity was still learning to use fire. None of them spoke. None of them moved. They simply watched the small human woman walking toward the central platform. The Voshkith Elder floated beside her, its light dim but steady. Katie could sense something from the ancient being, something that might have been curiosity or hope or fear. Perhaps it was all three. When she reached the central platform, Katie paused. This was a place where humans had never been allowed to stand. This was where the great decisions of galactic civilization were made, where species that had mastered time and space debated the future of the cosmos. And now a human stood here, about to speak words that would change everything. Katie thought about her father, a soldier who had served in 3 different conflicts before finally coming home to raise his family. She remembered sitting on his knee as a child, asking him why he had gone to war. His answer had been simple: because someone needed help and I could help them. She thought about her grandmother, a doctor who had worked in disaster zones around the world, saving lives in places where most people would have been too afraid to go. She remembered asking her grandmother the same question. Why did you go? Why did you risk everything? Her grandmother had smiled and said, because it was the right thing to do. She thought about every human who had ever stood up against injustice. Every soldier who had died protecting strangers. Every firefighter who had run into burning buildings. Every ordinary person who had risked their own safety to help someone in need. This was who humans were. This was what they did. Derek was still in the human section, watching her with wide eyes. She could see him mouthing words, probably telling her to wait, to think, to consult with Earth before making any promises. But Katie already knew what humanity's answer would be. She had known it from the moment the Elder asked the question. Ambassador Morrison, the Voshkith Elder said, its voice gentle but carrying to every corner of the chamber. I must ask you to understand the weight of what we are requesting. We are asking you to teach us violence. We are asking you to share the very thing we have condemned you for. We are asking you to help us become something we swore we would never be again. Katie nodded slowly. I understand. Do you require time to consult with your government? Do you need to negotiate terms? Do you wish to discuss what humanity would receive in return for this service? Katie looked out at the chamber, at the 846 species watching her. She saw beings of pure energy and beings of solid crystal. She saw creatures with 1,000 eyes and creatures with none. She saw the young and the ancient, the powerful and the weak, all of them united by the same desperate fear. They were waiting for her to demand something. They expected her to ask for power, for recognition, for repayment of every insult humanity had suffered. That was how galactic politics worked. Everything had a price. Everything was a negotiation. Katie took a deep breath. Then she gave humanity's answer. Yes. The single word echoed through the chamber. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was so complete that Katie could hear her own breathing. Then the confusion began. Species started talking over each other. their voices rising in a chaos of languages and sounds. Katie heard disbelief in those voices. She heard suspicion. She heard beings who had spent millions of years mastering the art of negotiation, struggling to understand what had just happened. The Voshkith Elder raised its light, calling for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, it turned to face Katie directly. "Ambassador Morrison, perhaps you did not understand me clearly. We are asking you for everything. We are asking you for everything. We are asking you to share your military knowledge, your weapons technology, your tactical expertise. We are asking you to train species who have never known conflict. We are asking you to lead us into a war that may destroy us all. Surely you want something in return." Katie smiled. It was a small smile, sad and warm at the same time. "You spent 50 years telling us that we were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted. You looked at our history and saw only war and death. But you never looked closely enough to see why we fought. We did not fight because we enjoyed killing. We fought because there were people who needed protecting. We fought because someone had to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." She paused, looking around the chamber. "You are asking us to help you. You are asking us to protect you from something that wants to destroy everything. And you think we would say no? You think we would demand payment for doing what we have always done?" A Valorian delegate rose from its seat, its silver body trembling. "But we treated you so poorly. We dismissed you. We mocked you. Why would you help us after everything we said?" Katie turned to face the Valorian. "Because you need help. That is the only reason we have ever needed." The Voshkith Elder was silent for a long moment. Its light flickered through colors that Katie could not name, patterns that might have represented emotions that humans had no words for. Then something happened that no one in the chamber had ever seen before. The Elder's light began to pulse with a soft blue glow, and streams of liquid energy began flowing down its form. The Elder was weeping. "In all my existence," the Elder said, its voice barely above a whisper, "I have never witnessed such a thing. We asked you to help us fight, and you simply said yes. No conditions. No demands. No price." Katie shrugged, a very human gesture that seemed strange in the midst of such an ancient gathering. "Some things do not need to be complicated. When someone is in trouble, you help them. That is it. That is all. We do not need a reason beyond that." The Elder turned to face the chamber. "Let it be recorded that on this day, the youngest species in the Galactic Council answered our call without hesitation. Let it be remembered that when we asked humanity to teach us how to fight, they did not ask what they would receive. They simply said yes." Katie felt Derek appear at her side. He had left the human section and crossed the chamber to stand with her. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "You did not even think about it, did you?" he asked quietly. Katie shook her head. "There was nothing to think about. It was the only answer we could give." Around them, the chamber was transforming. Fear was still present, but now it was mixed with something else, hope. The species, who had been ready to flee, were now looking at the two humans with new eyes. The ancient beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive were beginning to understand that perhaps they had missed something important. Perhaps violence was not always a weakness. Perhaps the capacity to fight was also the capacity to protect. The Voshkith Elder approached Katie and Derek, its light now burning brighter than before. "Ambassador Morrison, humanity has given us something more valuable than any weapon or technology. You have given us belief. Belief that we might survive this. Belief that there is still hope." Katie nodded. "Now let us get to work. The silence is coming, and we have a galaxy to save." The chaos in the Grand Chamber took nearly an hour to settle. Katie watched as ancient species tried to calm themselves, their fear so deep and primal that even their millions of years of wisdom could not contain it. She had never seen anything like it. These were beings who had mastered the fabric of space itself, who had solved problems that humans could not even imagine. And they were falling apart at the mention of a single word. When order was finally restored, the Voshkith Elder began to explain. Its light pulsed slowly as it spoke, and Katie found herself leaning forward to catch every word. 2 million years ago, the galaxy was young and full of life. Over 10,000 species had achieved interstellar travel. They built great civilizations, explored the cosmos, and believed they were the masters of their own destiny. Then the silence came. The Elder gestured, and the center of the chamber filled with a holographic display. Katie saw images of beautiful worlds, cities of crystal and light, beings of every shape and form living in peace. Then the images changed. She saw darkness sweeping across the stars. She saw planets burning. She saw entire species reduced to nothing but ash and memory. The silence came from the void between galaxies, the Elder continued. They are machine intelligences, created by a species that died before our galaxy was even born. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. They consume all organic life, harvest the resources of worlds, and move on. They have no purpose that we can understand. They simply destroy. Derek leaned close to Katie and whispered, "Why have we never heard of this? If this happened 2 million years ago, there should be records." Katie shook her head. She did not have an answer. The Elder seemed to hear the unspoken question. When the silence came, they destroyed over 10,000 species in less than a century. The civilizations that survived did so only because the silence suddenly withdrew. We do not know why they left. Perhaps they had taken what they wanted. Perhaps something called them elsewhere. But they left, and the survivors made a choice. They decided to bury the memory of the silence. They believed that if they forgot the darkness, it would never return. A Thelmari historian stepped forward, its crystal body still flickering with distress. "We kept the records hidden," it said. "Only the eldest species know the truth. We thought we were protecting the younger races. We thought we had more time." Katie felt anger rising in her chest. Humanity had been a member of the Council for 50 years. They had been treated as children, looked down upon for their violent history, excluded from important decisions. And all that time, the Council had been hiding the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. The Voshkith Elder continued. When the silence left, the surviving species made a vow. They would never again practice violence. They believed that war and conflict had made them weak, had divided them against a common enemy. So they evolved past it. They removed the capacity for violence from their very nature. They became peaceful, enlightened, advanced beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Elder's light dimmed even further. And now the silence is returning, and we have nothing with which to fight them. The chamber erupted into noise again. Species were shouting questions, demands, accusations. Some were blaming the ancient races for hiding the truth. Others were already talking about fleeing to the farthest edges of the galaxy. A few were simply sitting in stunned silence, unable to process what they were hearing. Katie stood up slowly. She did not raise her voice, but something about her movement caught attention. One by one, the species around her fell silent. Turning to look at the small human woman standing in the back of the chamber. "You said you have nothing to fight with," Katie said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "But you summoned us here, all of us. You did not just call this meeting to tell us we are going to die. You want something." The Voshkith Elder turned its full attention to her. Katie felt the weight of its ancient gaze, and for a moment she understood just how small and young humanity truly was. But she did not look away. "You are correct, Ambassador Morrison," the Elder said. We did not summon you merely to share our despair. We summoned you because we need help. And there is only one species young enough to still remember how to fight." The chamber fell completely silent. Katie felt every eye, every sensor, every form of alien perception focusing on her and Derek, two humans, standing alone among 846 species who had evolved beyond violence. "For 50 years, we have watched humanity," the elder said. "We have observed your wars, your conflicts, your endless capacity for destruction. We have judged you harshly for it. We have called you primitive, dangerous, unworthy of standing among the great civilizations. And now, in our darkest hour, we must admit the truth. Your violence, your aggression, your refusal to surrender even in the face of certain defeat. These are the very things we need." Derek grabbed Katie's arm, his eyes wide. She could feel his hand trembling. Neither of them had expected this. The Vashkith elder descended from its platform and moved toward the human section. It stopped directly in front of Katie, its light flickering with something that looked almost like hope. "Ambassador Morrison, I speak now on behalf of the entire Galactic Council. 846 species representing trillions upon trillions of lives. We ask you one question, and your answer will determine the fate of all organic life in this galaxy." Katie stood perfectly still. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud in the silence of the chamber. "Will you teach us how to fight?" The question hung in the air like a living thing. Katie looked around the chamber at the beings who had spent 50 years looking down on humanity. She saw their fear, their desperation, their hope. They were asking the species they had mocked and dismissed to save them all. Derek whispered, "Katie, we should contact Earth. We need to discuss this. We cannot just answer a question like this on our own." But Katie was not listening. She was thinking about every war humanity had ever fought, every battle, every sacrifice. She was thinking about the soldiers who had given their lives so others could live. She was thinking about the simple truth at the heart of human nature. When humans saw someone in trouble, they helped. It was not complicated. It was not political. It was just who they were. The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ambassador Katie Morrison was sleeping in her small quarters on the human embassy station when her personal communicator began screaming with an emergency alert. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, and grabbed the device from her bedside table. The words on the screen made her blood run cold. It was a summons to the Grand Chamber on Varanthos Prime, signed by the Vashkith Elder himself. In 50 years of humanity's membership in the Galactic Council, no human had ever received such a summons. Katie got out of bed and began dressing in her formal ambassador uniform. Her hands were shaking slightly as she fastened the buttons. She had spent 15 years working her way up through the diplomatic corps, learning alien languages and customs, building relationships with species that looked at humans the way humans might look at ants. She had faced condescension and barely hidden disgust from beings who considered humanity too young and too violent to be taken seriously. But she had never felt fear like this. Something was very wrong. Lieutenant Commander Derek Holloway was waiting for her when she stepped out of her quarters. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a calm presence that Katie had come to rely on during difficult negotiations. He was already dressed and ready, his face tight with concern. "I got one too," he said, holding up his own communicator. Every human diplomat in Council space received the same message. Katie nodded and began walking toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. "Have you heard anything about what this is about?" Derek fell into step beside her. "Nothing official, but I have been talking to some of my contacts among the Valorian delegation. They received summons too. Every species in the Council has been called to Varanthos Prime." Katie stopped walking and turned to face him. "Every species?" "All 847 of them. That is what I am hearing. Katie, this has not happened in over 400,000 years. The last time every species was summoned together was before humans even existed. They continued to the shuttle in silence. Katie's mind was racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. A war between major powers? A cosmic disaster? Some kind of plague spreading between worlds? None of it made sense. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for millions of years. Whatever could threaten them all must be something beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. The journey to Varanthos Prime took 3 days. Katie spent most of that time trying to gather information, but every channel she tried came up empty. The Council was maintaining complete silence about the purpose of the gathering. The only thing she learned was that fear was spreading through every delegation. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were suddenly reaching out, asking the same questions. What is happening? Why have we been summoned? What are we facing? On the second day of travel, Katie managed to get a secure communication line to Earth. Secretary General Nora Bishop appeared on her screen, looking tired and worried. Katie, we've been trying to figure out what is going on. Our intelligence networks have nothing. Whatever this is, the Council has kept it completely secret. Madam Secretary, if they are summoning everyone, this affects humanity too. Someone needs to speak for us. Someone needs to have the authority to make decisions. Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I am giving you full authority to speak for Earth and all human colonies. Whatever happens in that chamber, your word is humanity's word. I trust you, Katie. The weight of that trust settled on Katie's shoulders like a physical thing. She thanked the Secretary General and ended the call, then sat alone in her cabin, staring at the stars streaming past the window. When they arrived at Varanthos Prime, Katie was struck by the sheer number of ships in orbit. Thousands of vessels of every shape and size filled the space around the planet, representing species from every corner of the galaxy. She saw the crystalline ships of the Thalmari, the massive living vessels of the Corvin, the elegant silver crafts of the Valorians. All of them had come in response to the same summons. The Grand Chamber was the largest structure Katie had ever seen. It was built to hold representatives from every species in the Council, and it needed to be enormous to accommodate beings that ranged from tiny insectoids to giants the size of buildings. Katie and Derek were guided to the human section, a small area near the back that reflected humanity's low status in galactic politics. As she took her seat, Katie noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The Thalmari, an ancient species who served as the Council's historians and record keepers, were visibly afraid. Their crystalline bodies were flickering with colors that Katie had learned to recognize as extreme distress. The Thalmari were over 2 million years old as a civilization. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires. If they were afraid, then whatever was coming must be truly terrible. The chamber fell silent as the Voshkith Elder appeared at the central platform. The Voshkith were beings of pure light and energy, so old that no one remembered when they had first achieved consciousness. They rarely spoke, preferring to observe and guide rather than command. But today, the Elder's light was dim, almost gray, as if something was draining the very life from its ancient form. Children of the galaxy, the Elder began, its voice echoing through the chamber in every language simultaneously. I have called you here because I must share knowledge that has been kept secret for 2 million years. I must tell you about the silence. The reaction was immediate. Katie watched as every species that was old enough to remember that name began to panic. The Thalmari crystals shattered and reformed in patterns of pure terror. The Corvin living ships outside began emitting distress signals that could be felt even inside the chamber. Ancient beings who had watched stars be born and die were suddenly screaming like frightened children. But the humans, The youngest species in the room sat in confused silence. Katie had never heard of the silence. Derek looked at her with questions in his eyes that she could not answer. Whatever this threat was, it predated humanity by millions of years. The Voshkith Elder raised its light, and the chamber slowly returned to order. But the fear remained, thick in the air, suffocating in its intensity. "The silence is returning," the Elder continued. "Our scouts have detected them at the edge of the galaxy. They will be here within 1 year." Katie did not know what the silence was. She did not understand why ancient civilizations were falling apart around her. But as she looked at the chaos in the grand chamber, she felt something cold and heavy settling in her chest. Whatever was coming, it was bad enough to terrify beings who had existed since before humanity's ancestors had crawled out of the ocean. And somehow, Katie knew that this summons was not just about sharing information. The Council wanted something from them. The question was what